You know how tired we are of living out of bags?
But it is possible to get some folks into housing.
Here's some clothes. I think these are most.
Stop just kicking the rock down the road.
I think more needs to be done.
I think those who come here, they want to work.
Racism is still alive and well, unfortunately, in Maine.
This is exactly the type of innovative building that we need.
Every resident, every citizen of Portland deserves affordable housing.
Good evening, I'm Zach Blanchard. Thanks for joining us for this Voice of the Voter Forum here on News Center, Maine. I'm joined tonight by the 5 candidates running to be the next mayor of the state's largest city, a city that many say is at a crossroads, facing a homelessness crisis, a rising cost of living, and a lot of opportunity. So with that, let's meet the candidates hoping to be Portland's next mayor. City Councilor Pius Ali, former City Councilor Justin Costa, City Councilor and former Cumberland County Sheriff Mark Dion, software engineer and political newcomer Dylan Pugh, and City Councilor Andrew Zarro. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. So the goal tonight is to just have a conversation. This isn't your traditional debate. We won't have any opening statements. We're going to keep things brief. I'll keep you honest there. So let's just dive right in. There is no denying the homelessness crisis is top of mind right now. It's more visible than ever before. At last check, the city says there are at least 280 tents throughout the city. There have been several sweeps of encampments. The new Homeless Services Center is at capacity, and there's still no permanent solution. So I want to start with the one guy who hasn't held political office and has not served on the council, Dylan Pugh. What new perspective would you bring to the table?
I think you're absolutely right that Portland is at a crossroad right now. And one of the first things we need to do is change the way that we're talking about this. We talk in terms of tents. I would talk in terms of people. Every single tent is representative of a person who has faced systemic failure throughout their entire life. So I would stop sweeps. That's the very first thing, because we need to reestablish that trust. And once we've reestablished that trust, we get the people in to do the person-to-person work to help people move into traditional and transitional housing. The way that we need to think about this is not in terms of shelters, but in terms of housing. Housing first is by far the most effective way we can address homelessness. So that would be my primary focus, is homes, not more shelters.
Now, of you who are on the council, Mark Dion, Andrew Zarro, Pius Ali, Pius, you're the only one who voted for that temporary fix to add 50 beds to the existing Homeless Services Center. Are you frustrated that the other councilors here didn't get on board fully with that?
Well, I think decision making is based on several factors. Since they are here, I think they may be able to speak to why they voted the way they voted. I voted to move it forward because I know that we are in a crisis, and in the next few weeks it's going to get cold. Actually, it's a little bit chilly outside. When I was coming here, I have to put on a hair to cover my bald head, and I voted to move that 50 so that we will start moving people before the weather gets extremely cold and we may not know what to do with them. This is the only solution that we have as of now, but it's a first step towards figuring out how to solve the situation.
Yeah, Councilor Andrew Zarro.
Yeah, listen, this is, I don't want to oversimplify this, but we made a promise to District 5. We opened a new shelter in March, 208 beds, at capacity day one. A couple months later, we voted to approve another 180 beds for emergency shelter in District 5. And I felt like it was our responsibility to honor a promise that we made and be supportive of my colleague who represents that district. We aren't going to get out of this problem by continuously doubling down on emergency housing, because our emergency housing is being used as an extended stay program. We need transitional housing with wraparound services and housing first policies to remove the barriers that exist to get people out of tents, off of the streets, and into shelter. I think our goal here collectively is to get people into shelter. And right now, that's a top priority for me.
Yeah, you mentioned there are a lot of barriers. There's also a lot of finger pointing on this issue. Everyone seems to have something to say about it. I want to take the chance to hear from everyday people who live in the city. Here's one of their questions.
Reasons why people are homeless, everything from drug abuse to mental illness. How are they going to figure out which to prioritize?
So, Mark Dion, what issue would you prioritize?
I think you can't just go in with a menu. You have to do a triage, but on multiple levels at once. The mentally ill need to be taken if necessary into a protective custody so we can get mental health evaluations and help in their proper placement. You can't wait for someone who's in a crisis to make an informed decision about how to care for themselves. That's our responsibility, and it's the best interest of the city and that individual to do that. Those who are trapped by substance use disorder, I think our team from social services has been working valiantly to get them into proper supervision. And then third, we tend to forget the public safety responsibility we have to those who are in the camps and to those who abut the camps. I want to talk about neighbors and residents who have to live with that chaos that's represented by a minority of people, but that's active drug dealing and the consequences that follow. I think the police have a significant role to play, and we need to ensure the safety of everyone that's connected with an encampment. So it's a two-pronged approach. Social services where necessary, social services as well as those who can't make the decision, and public safety.
Yeah, Justin Costa, you were shaking your head there when Mark Dion said that there was kind of chaos that these residents were experiencing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a responsibility right now to be able to deal with the long term and the short term at the same time. I mean, that's what government has to be able to do. The long term solutions are really complex. You know, 4 of us have worked on these issues over the years. There's nothing simple about how you deal with mental health. There's nothing simple about how you deal with substance abuse. Those are long-term solutions that we all agree that we need to work on, but while we work on those, we need to make sure that we're dealing with the urgent issue right now, which is the encampments. And no one benefits from these. They are a horrible situation for the people that are living in them. They're a horrible situation for the people that abut them. You know, and
I'm going to stop you there, and we're actually going to take a quick break because we're going to hear more about what the candidates have to say about these encampment sweeps right after this. Welcome back to our Voice of the Voter Forum. We'll stay on the topic of homelessness. With shelters at capacity and nowhere for the unhoused to go, encampment sweeps continue. Take a look at this map. It shows the largest encampments on the peninsula right now, where over 300 people live. It seems as one is cleared out, another only grows. Mark Dion, you're a former state representative. This week, some state lawmakers put forward some legislation to stop these encampment sweeps. Do you support that?
It's wrong-headed. It doesn't respect the public safety interests of the abutting residents, and it doesn't respect what's in the best interest of the city. Those are public health and public safety hazards. We have a responsibility to the community to act today. And this idea that we'll just stop it and that it organically will take care of itself, as I said, is ill-informed and ill-advised.
There are obviously members of you here that don't agree with that, right? Andrew?
Well, I mean, I think even if it's well-intended, I do believe it's short-sighted in terms of public policy, because what it's not getting at is the solution to the actual issue, right? It's not providing housing opportunities. It's not providing mental health services or substance use treatment. It's just looking at one side of the coin. So while I want to believe that it's well-intended, at the end of the day, I have a hard time believing it's going to meet the needs of the people who are the most vulnerable in the community. What we need to do is prioritize on the systemic issues that are creating encampments in the first place. We're only looking at the symptom, not the reason why we are seeing folks living on the streets.
Yeah, and the other problem is there's nowhere for these people to go. One idea that was proposed before the Homeless Services Center was this idea of smaller shelters scattered throughout the city. Dylan Pugh, would you support that approach moving forward?
I think if we're going to be committing any new resources to this, we should not be building shelters. We should be building housing first so that people can come in and get stabilized. I think we know from experience and from evidence that this is the most effective way of addressing this. So I think certainly a smaller shelter is better than a larger shelter where you're warehousing people, but it's not the right approach going forward, and I would push for more homes instead of more shelters.
I want to add something to what Dylan said.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that I did actually work in a home that does exactly what Dylan is saying right here on Brackett Street. We give people who have mental health substance use and are homeless into their home through an organization called Volunteers of America. And I think I've repeated this over and over. It's becoming a breaking record. That have done exactly what Dylan is saying. So I would support something like that.
All right.
I just want to take issue with what my colleague here said about warehousing people. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our Homeless Services Center is unique and leads the way in terms of wraparound services that are provided on site. They're not simply put into a building and locked away. There's active intervention and care plans being developed for these individuals. So I just want to set aside this warehousing stereotype. That's not the case at all.
If I could just be clear, you can provide wraparound services in a different setting. Regardless of where you're providing these services, they're essential. But people need to have the autonomy and the agency to make their own stability in their lives. So I agree with services, but let's do it in a home, not in a shelter.
All right, another big piece of this puzzle is asylum seekers. Portland has long been a welcoming place for immigrants over the last several years, though it has come at a cost. Between January and April of this year, more than 1,000 people seeking asylum came to the city. They were housed in the Expo. Many are in the Homeless Services Center now, and now at least 60 families are in hotels in Freeport and Lewiston. Pius Ali, I know you have been an outspoken advocate for these immigrants. Do you think it should continue to be the role of the city to shelter them and to help them?
Well, currently the governor's office have established or is in the process of establishing what is called the Office of New Americans. And they are going around having a conversation in the community to see what is needed. In the future, I would love to see what services the state will provide, and then the city will fill in where needed. One thing that I will not change is Portland's welcoming nature. We are a city that welcomes everyone. It doesn't matter where they are coming from. I will do that. I will provide the services that we provide now in terms of language acquisition and getting them to, understand the city that they live in.
Yeah, and I believe a new shelter is set to open next month just for asylum seekers. Justin Costa, would you continue to support that facility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the city is doing a better job actually handling that issue right now. There is a short-term plan to deal with it, where there really is not, to deal with the encampment crisis right now and what we're going to do with people when the encampments start to be cleared. I agree with Pius. You know, Portland has long been a welcoming community, and that's something that we're all very proud of. I think ultimately, though, this is a regional issue and has to be treated as such. You know, there have been 1,600 people seeking asylum that have arrived in the city. That's going to be a challenge for any city of 67,000 people to accommodate in short order. But it should not be such a large issue if we're able to spread this out over an area, you know, encompassing somewhere down to York County up through the Brunswick-Topsom area. We need to regionalize this, and the hope, I think, and the opportunity for the next mayor is that there is actually a bipartisan consensus around some of these issues. We know that our policies right now, our federal policies that prohibit people from working, are unpopular on both sides of the aisle. We know that there's a deep recognition of the long-term demographic and workforce challenges that Maine is facing. So we've seen support from a variety of places, actually non-traditional places, for getting asylum seekers more fully incorporated into the communities that they arrive in short order, and we need to do more.
Mark Diam, would you see it as your role to work with leaders of other cities to actually get them to help you here?
I think it's important to have a coalition. And it has been the discussion among the Greater Council of Governments in terms of what to do with immigrants. But let me put it this way. Portland cannot continue to shoulder the burden of the financial responsibility that comes with the feds looking the other way on this policy and no clear executive action from Augusta yet. I'm all for commissions and soliciting input, but these issues are today. That problem is tonight. We need executive action out of Augusta that will help relocate immigrant families to where services might exist and where housing might exist. We can't continue to do it as Portland. No one wants to talk about that. But I can't keep asking property taxpayers to assume a responsibility that was never a municipal one to begin with.
All right, time now for us to take another break. When we come back, how the workforce fits into all this. You're watching News Center Maine. Our New Center Maine Voice of the Voter Forum is back with the candidates for Portland Mayor. We were just talking about the complex issue of homelessness, and at the root of it is something that affects all of us, affordable housing. Many of you have listed this as a key issue on your campaign websites and mailers. Dylan Pugh, on your website, you say, quote, "My family and nearly all my friends have been priced out, and I myself struggle to stay put." Who do you blame for that?
I think you have to blame systematic failures at every level. We need to start thinking about housing in Portland as the way it really is. Housing has become a commodity, which is a mechanism for outside actors to extract an enormous amount of wealth out of our community. So I've faced the struggles as a renter, I now face them as a homeowner. I have no intention of raising property taxes because I can see how much of a burden that is. So what we need to look at is who are the people that are making a lot of money off of the housing stock in Portland, and how do we keep more of those resources with the people they deserve, the renters and the owners here in Portland.
All right, what's the first step to fix it for you, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the biggest issue for the next mayor. It's a core part of my campaign, and it does come from decades of inaction. But the good news is there's a lot we can do about it. The first priority I have is to rezone our city to be in compliance with the legislature's LD 2003. I think there's a lot of hesitation around changing the quality or character of neighborhoods, but we don't actually have to do that, especially if we don't do anything right now, people are getting priced out of the city, right? And so the character is changing either way. I think we need to have a comprehensive land use policy that democratizes the way we use land. It's one of the most impactful tools a municipality has. We need to build housing in places that make sense. And I think we need about 10,000 units in the next 10 years. A report just came out showing that the state is 84,000 housing units short, and a good chunk of that is in Portland. We can do that in vacant land that's not being used, and we can do it without impacting Portlanders, and also while lowering their taxes in doing so.
Yeah, I want to pull up that report. That report from Maine Housing and other agencies released just last week found the state needs more than 80,000 homes by 2030, accounting for short supply and expected population growth. The same report shared a graph inside. We're going to pull that up now. It's showing rent in Portland increased by 12% in 2021, while renter household incomes increased by about 8%, a trend that only continues. Mark Dion, well, there is quite a bit of construction happening in the city. There's a lot of debate over just how much of it is affordable, not just to buy, but to rent.
Well, the city's been partnered to about 3,000 units being constructed or approved since 2018. But the big picture issue for housing is the interest rate. It's a national decision. It's a federal financial decision with the reserve, and that's locked renters, landlords, and homeowners in a freeze mode. And it drives up the price of what Dylan refers to as the commodity. I think what the city can do is engage in rezoning where it's necessary, but pay particular attention to neighborhood input because they want to preserve the quality of space. And then as a city, we can make limited investments, I hope, into rental housing that addresses families with 3 bedrooms. We have a lot of 2 bedrooms units in the city. We need 3 bedrooms for families that are looking for a place to live. And finally, the permitting system needs to be reformed so we can shorten the timeline and the cost between planning board approval and actually starting to nail wood together.
Yeah, but I think all of us, when you're talking about 3 bedrooms, when you talk about going from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, never mind a 1-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, that cost is through the roof. Obviously, something that has an impact on a lot of minorities in the city, right, Pius?
Yes. So what most people who are being priced out are minorities. That is why I am proposing a $50 million housing bond. And some of what I hope that we will do as a city is, one, there is a type of housing called cooperative housing, where individuals who go into this are not just paying rent. They will pay rent and they will also build equity. Those are some of the tools that I will put in place. Those are some of the tools that I'll put in place to mitigate the housing crisis that we are facing.
Well, I think this is, one of the biggest and respectfully disagreements that I think I have with some of the other candidates right now. I think that this is a really complex issue, and it's a prime example of how the city is really struggling to just take concrete steps, get consensus, get 5 votes, move something forward and implement it while we have all of these longer term conversations. So think that there are plenty of worthy ideas that keep getting thrown out during this campaign. And my respectful question is, the chair and members of the Housing Committee, where have those proposals been? Everyone has had the opportunity to introduce those exact proposals for years. So my suggestion, seeing this dynamic, has been to say that I think there are things that the city can do right now that aren't terribly controversial, what I call the low-hanging fruit. And so you say, let's look at the Brighton Avenue corridor, the Forest Avenue corridor, and provide some density bonuses to people, to the nonprofits that are trying to qualify for affordable housing programs. And what's interesting, because this is not our first roundtable on these, is if you listen carefully, I mean, there's plenty of disagreement, but there's also plenty of cross currents here. And Mark and I are very sensitive, it seems, to the concerns of off-peninsula neighborhoods, the folks that moved into single-family neighborhoods and want them to stay like that. All of us are sensitive to the long-term affordable housing needs, and you start to sense all the different disagreements that come to the surface. No one says anything when I say what I just said, and so why don't you start in these two areas and do it in exactly this way? No one says, oh, I can't imagine that happening. And that's the point, is we need to start just making progress on this issue, because we're all trying to move in the same direction.
Well, I just want my colleague here to know that the housing, the cooperative housing that I'm talking about, actually in the next 2 weeks, the housing committee is going to make a proposal, will move forward a proposal to the council for it to be funded, the first one. And that we're making use of the Judicial housing fund that we have. We're giving an entity $55 million to do just that. And also, a couple of years ago, when my colleague here was running for city council, he did brought the proposals of those two corridors that he's talking about. He was on the council for 6 years. I haven't seen that happen. And so now he's trying to say that those of us who are on the council are doing nothing.
All right, we're going to leave it there. When we come back, the issue of hate. Thanks for staying with us. We now want to tackle a very real issue all across the country that has found its way here to Portland: hate. This was the moment back in April when members from a neo-Nazi group and counter-protesters were ordered to disperse by the Portland Police Department, an officer pulling out his weapon before the group left the scene. No one was ever charged. Since then, there have been several city council meetings that were Zoom-bombed with hate speech. Andrew Zaro, in many cases, that speech has been racist, homophobic. I know as an out gay man that this probably impacts you personally. What would you do to finally put a stop to this in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought 3 years ago when I threw my hat in to be a local elected official that this is what you were signing up for. And many of my colleagues on the council and the community deal with this as well. This has been something that is not isolated just to Portland, Maine. It's happening across the country. And it is a very specific attempt to undermine the democracy of our constituents. It's to undermine what's happening in the public square. And I think the council has been resolute recently in dealing with this head on. But there's a bigger issue happening here. We need to stand together in a multiracial democracy to make sure that we are not going to tolerate this in any way, shape, or form. We need to work closely with the Portland Police Department, with our district attorney, with the Attorney General, to make sure that these anonymous people who are doing this to our citizenry are held accountable. And I think most of us, all of us up here, agree on this issue 100%. This is not to be tolerated, and I will not accept that as your next mayor.
Mark Dion, you were the former Cumberland County Sheriff, of course. Would you say that leaders and law enforcement in the city and county aren't working together as much as they should be?
Well, I think they're working together, but I think we need to send a strong message as a city council, as a mayor, that we want to hunt these individuals down. I'll put it in plain English. Hunt them down, bring them to court, prosecute them, hold them accountable in front of a judge, so we send a clear, strong message that we won't accept this. Tolerate means there's a boundary, you can get right up to it. I'm beyond that. I initiated the state's first hate crimes unit. I know the experience of who the targets are and what it meant for their families, themselves, and their community. We have to be proactive in this. I want to see the Attorney General issue injunctions where necessary and the prosecutors to bring forward criminal complaints. And what I've learned in that experience is bigots hate to be identified as bigots. They hate it. I'll use the word appropriately here. They cannot stand the glare of their own light. And that's what I want as a mayor. That's what I'll expect from the city manager and the police chief, is we're not just going to take this passively. We're not just going to have community vigils. We're going to take firm, strong enforcement action.
All right, you mentioned hate crimes. I just want to look at the stats from Portland PD. 55 bias-related crimes in Portland in the last 5 years. 12 of those were in the last year alone. Again, everything from racism to homophobia on that list. Of course, the problem is these numbers are largely unreported. Pius Ali, do Portland police need to do more to know how to appropriately respond to these kinds of crimes and incidents?
I think Portland police is doing they're doing a good job, but they can improve. In 2021-22, when we had the George Floyd situation, the Portland police did a study that show how this is already going on in our community, meaning hate speeches and also the way they stop drivers and the way they interact with people of color. And I think they are in the process of putting things in place to improve their work. And I'm looking forward to working with them on that.
Justin Costa.
Yeah, I mean, I think as has been said, we're all completely on the same page about this. I mean, this poisons the well of our democracy. It's an abuse of the system that is meant to try and make government more accessible to people. And it has no place in Portland. It's really unfortunate that anyone is subjected to these things. You know, I'm sure, you know, my colleagues I know have been over the years. I know that I was targeted as a Hispanic person. I mean, and this is an issue where I think the only thing I really want to say is that there's no daylight between us. And every time we get asked this question, I think that's the most important thing to emphasize, that we all feel the same way. Everyone condemns this, and we're going to do everything that we can to address it.
Yeah, because I think at the same time, Dylan Pugh, this is about, it's one thing to talk and it's one thing to agree. It's another to actually act and do something about it.
That's right, and I do agree with everyone. I think Justin is absolutely right. There is no disagreement with us about the urgency to act on this. And I think Pius is absolutely right that the Portland police has done a great job so far. But sadly, this is a reality that we have to be prepared to confront going forward. Because this is, as Andrew mentioned, not just a regional issue, it is a national issue, and we're going to have forces that are going to intensify this, so we need to attack this at the root issue and make sure that Maine is a place where this ideology cannot survive.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Our Voice of the Voter Forum is back right after this. We're back and ready to shift gears to climate change. Experts warn sea levels are expected to rise 10 to 17 inches by 2030 here in the city. Compared to the start of the century, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than most of the world's oceans. In 2018, the City Council passed a resolution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions citywide 80% by the year 2050. But leaders with the state's Climate Council, like Hannah Pingree, say communities need to do more.
Lots of communities are doing climate planning, so how do they plan for sea level rise? How do they make their infrastructure more ready? It's one of the many things we are doing to try to help Maine communities really take matters into their own hands, decide what's important for them, and take action.
I want to get to you, Justin Costa. What further action would you take here?
Yeah, I think you know, that the city has done a lot to try and prepare for climate change over the last several years, and most of us have been involved in that work. You know, I think, need to make sure that the city's efforts are focused in a couple of ways. We need to focus on some of the particular impacts on Portland, so particularly sea level rise in our most affected neighborhoods that we're going to have to address. And then I think we really need to make sure that we're focused on the things that have the biggest bang for the buck, and anything that we can do to create greater incentives for electric vehicles. We know that automobiles are a primary contributor to climate change, and also looking at our built environment, our building envelope, and there are ongoing efforts to deal with energy benchmarking and try to improve the efficiency of buildings throughout the city. some of the things that I would really like us to look at are creative ways that we could expand EV charging stations throughout the city. So I think that we actually have the opportunity now, I won't get into the technical weeds of it, but to expand that even into neighborhoods throughout the city. And that's something that we should be definitely pursuing, as well as all the partnerships that we already have with South Portland and others.
Mark Dion, many environmental activists argue that these issues need progressive solutions. But you told the Press Herald the council is perhaps too liberal, saying, quote, "I'm trying to move the council back to the center." Does that apply to this issue?
It does. I mean, I hear a lot of great ideas. My first reaction is, do our taxpayers have the capacity to take on the financial responsibility that comes from all those ideas? So in my climate plan, it's pretty straightforward and it's simple. One, I'd like to have a master urban tree plan. We were once the forest city. I'd like to return us to that status and aggressively plant trees throughout the city. It returns human scale to our environment. And second, I'd like to work on solving the flooding on Commercial Street. When I think of sea level rising, I think Commercial Street and the cyclical and increasing frequency of our loss through that flooding of our commercial spaces, our roadway system. I think a mayor has to listen to big ideas and then distill it into concrete, achievable programs, bearing in mind who's actually going to foot the bill for that initiative.
Yes, Andrew Zara?
Thank you. This issue is why I'm on the city council. For the last 3 years, I've been the climate champion on our council and have worked diligently to push quite a bit of significant policy out for the people of Portland. But this issue is extremely important, not just to me, but to everybody, because this is the viability of our future as a city. The municipality is the first responder on most things, but specifically climate change. We feel the impacts greater than those at the state and federal level. And that's why I've been working for the past year and a half on transitioning our electrical grid, which is antiquated and outdated, using federal funding to upgrade our capacity and change the quality of life for Portlanders. It's not going to impact the taxpayers of Portland because this issue requires state and federal investment, but it's our obligation as the municipality to take advantage of those incentives now. We've already expanded EV charging significantly. We've introduced a composting program. We've done energy benchmarking. I want to put solar on every municipal building and transition us off of fossil fuels. This is a luxurious conversation for us to be having now. I want to know how we're going to help people in 10, 20, 30 years from now when they're going to need to know what we did to help their quality of life.
All right, we're going to leave it there. You're watching News Center. Thanks for staying with us. We want to do something a little bit different now, some rapid fire questions. So all I need you to do is answer yes or no. Pius Ali, we will start with you. Do you think the role of mayor should be more powerful?
No.
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 Yes.
No.
All right. Are you in favor of expanding rent control, Andrew?
No.
Protecting it.
No.
No.
Improving it.
Do you think Governor Janet Mills is doing enough to help Portland address homelessness?
Yes.
No.
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 Do you support limiting cruise ships in the city?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
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 Do you approve of the use of ranked choice voting in this election?
Yes.
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 Absolutely.
Yes.
And on a little bit of a lighter note, lobster roll, butter or mayo? Andrew Zara.
The most contentious question. Butter.
Mayo.
Both.
Both.
Whoa.
Breaking the rules.
Butter.
Butter.
All right. Another positive note, I just want you to all talk about Portland's future in 3 words or less. Pius Ali.
Affordable, welcoming, clean energy.
I was going to say welcoming, inclusive, progressive.
Safer and affordable.
Justice, innovation, and compassion.
Affordable, sustainable, and prosperous.
All right. Thanks for playing. The candidates for Portland Mayor will be back right after this. All right, we're back and wrapping things up with closing statements. We'll work from left to right here, right to left rather. Andrew Zaro, you're up first.
Thank you. Portland, I want to remind you of the crossroads we're at for our future. To me, the answer is obvious. Either we're going to embrace progress, unity, innovation, and smart growth, or we're going to risk falling back and not doing enough. As your next mayor, I promise to champion collaboration, innovation, and the well-being of each and every one of you. I want to be proud of our city, and I want to dream big, but also act. My campaign is a promise to the people of Portland to take on our greatest challenges and to meet the moment. So I'm asking you to join me, because I can't do it alone. I humbly ask that you rank me as your first vote in November's election, and I appreciate you considering me.
Portland, thank you for tuning in. We can stand together as a city and do something that has never been done. We can be the one city in the nation that has solved these big issues. We can be the city where everyone feels safe and prosperous and welcome. These things are imminently possible, but we must change our approach. We must build new systems that have as their basis empathy, compassion, and human welfare. So if you believe, as I do, that Portland is full of smart, dedicated, passionate people working to make the city a better place, and that we must seek a politics that honors those people, I would ask that you put me down first on November 7th so that we can walk this road together, and it would be my honor. Thank you so much.
Mark Dion.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm asking for your vote as mayor. In the past, you have trusted me by electing me as your sheriff, a state representative, and a state senator. And now I sit here before you as a counselor. I love this city. I've committed my public life to the best interests of you, your friends, and families across Portland. I'll never forget who actually has to pick up the tab for every decision we make in the city council, and that I will advance as a mayor. Thank you for the trust that you've granted me over these years, and again, I hope in whole humbleness that you choose me as your next mayor. Thank you.
Justin Costa.
Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you to all the candidates for participating and running. Fundamentally, I'm running to be the next mayor of Portland because I believe that Portland needs a change right now. And as you've heard this evening, there are far more things that we all agree on than that we disagree on. But at the same time, I believe that we have seen over the last few years that the city is struggling to translate big ideas like affordable housing and homelessness into concrete policies and get results based on enacting those policies. I've had the privilege of serving you on the city council for 6 years, on the school board for 6 years before that. I got things done in both of those offices, and I'll get things done as your mayor.
Faisal Ali, the final word tonight.
Thank you, Portland. Thank you for tuning in and joining us to listen to all the big ideas that we have. More than 20 years ago, I came to this country and arrived in New York. A few years after that, September 11 happened, and I found Portland. Portland embraced me. I moved to Portland and got a job in the waterfront doing dishes. Think about this. 20 years later, you supported me and got me to run for school board and you elected for me to be on the city council. Tonight, I stand before you with the possibilities of being the next mayor in the best city in New England. But the conditions on the ground that gave me this opportunity does not look real for many people. That is why I'm running for mayor. I want to work with you to make this possible for everybody who lives in this city, whether they are coming from up north or they are coming from somewhere or out of the country. I want them to have the possibilities and the opportunities that Portland have given me. And I hope you will rank me to be your next mayor.
And that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all so much for watching. A reminder, Election Day is November 7th, but early absentee voting is already happening. I'm Zach Blanchard from all of us here at News Center Maine. Have a great day.